Next up for the YD2, I decided to go out with the standard knuckles at the front and get myself some wrap up next knuckles, or WUN as some people pronounce it apparently. But anyway, so wrap up next knuckles. I decided to get these. You've got loads of options for the YD2. You have got Overdose, and they're about sort of £60 I think plus bearings. You've got the actual YD2 ones, I think they're about £75 for the full kit, which apparently they're adjustable, and people kind of rate those. But the other ones that people said that they rated was the wrap-up next ones, and being a cheapskate, these are only £40. And they also need bearings. So after a little hunt about, they need Tamiya 850 bearings, or 850 spec. So you can just Google that. I just went on eBay, got myself a set of those. They were £4 for the bearings, so not all in all, not the most expensive of a hop-up part. And yeah, let's get them open and let you see them. So these are super small, super diddy knuckles. I guess that means you've got more options of sort of maneuverability of position you want to put it in. They've got loads and loads of options of holes. Look, you can see the top there. And the same at the bottom. So you've got loads of options of messing around with your caster angles and with Ackerman and camber and such like by messing around with these. Well, not so much camber, I suppose, actually, but just the rest. And with that, hopefully I'll get a lot of adjustability. Interestingly, there's only one hole in the front. So if you're someone who runs the optional disc kit on your YD2 in the 2 holes, you are going to need some different caliper setups to put the discs on there and be pretty boy with your calipers. I actually printed a set and they fitted quite nice, but I could never get like just cheap discs that fitted well on the hexes. So I ended up just binning it off again. So yeah, the other thing that is that these 850 bearings are smaller. So they're really small bearings that go into these, smaller than the standard ones that you get inside of your YD2 knuckles. And the point about that is they are lighter. So the whole point about these is they're a really light front end. Now, the strange thing about that is sometimes you then get things like wheel weights to add the weight back in. So heaven knows about that. But I do know that my front end is a little bit light at the moment. It tends to push on a little bit. You have to overpower it a bit at the back end to get it to step out. So hopefully this isn't going to make the situation worse. But if it does, I guess I can add weight into the right places. I guess that's the point. I kind of feel that's how carbon chassis go. Everyone's like, why do you do carbon chassis? So you can control the flex and so you can move the weight into the right places, I guess. So, you know, that's kind of how I feel about these. So I'll give them a go, and then if I need to add weight back in, then I might do. But you can tell they are definitely lighter than standard. They're really light. And they supposedly, just by changing for these smaller bearings, you lose 2 grams per side. 2 grams. What's 2 grams between friends, eh? But anyway, that wasn't a drug-related joke. But also, that is a small gain, isn't it? And I think from everything I've learned so far in the RC stuff, everything's about marginal gains, tiny little gains all the time make one really good chassis. So let's see how these go. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop out that little retainer, pop in the bearings and fit up the standard axles, and then we'll see how they assemble. So let's have a look at these bearings for size comparison. Wow. Difference is quite considerable actually, isn't it? And you know, sounds ridiculous, but I can tell the difference in weight there. Put those little bad lads in. Ooh, fit up nice. And these weren't actual Tamiya ones, these were just generic ones from an eBay, which said they were to the right spec for the Tamiya 850s and the right size. So that works well, doesn't it? Another one on that side. I think that little spacer there is there because your bearing is so much smaller. So I guess that goes on the inside to space that piece out. I'm going to try that out. I guess you can change it up to whichever side you like. So you could have that on that side. We can have it on the other side. There's no guide with it, so we are completely blind on that one. I will maybe do a little check online. So there you go, that's that assembled versus the standard one. And what you can see is that the standard one has a staggered setup on the caster angle. So the top pin here is set further back than the bottom pin. So it sits like that. And you can see that's about where the car sits as well when you compare that to the arms on the car, how the car arms are set up, one slightly back from the other. So I'm going to copy that initially on my setup. So I'm going to go for, I think, the middle pin at the bottom and the back pin at the top. And then if we compare the other way around, so if I compare it to this way, like this and this way, you can see that the pin here is on the inside edge and then the pin at the bottom is on the outside edge, but only just slightly. So I think I'm going to copy those settings. So the bottom pin is going to go, I'm going to go middle hole outside edge, and the top one I'm going to go back hole the inside edge. And the bottom one there is going to be in line with the pin. So I'm going to pop them on like that, and we'll see how they look, sort of caster angle and camber and Ackerman and such like. Stop saying camber, you get me. So checking up some pictures, I am correct. That should be, the little washer should go on the inside there. All right. One thing I have noticed though is that other people have a spacer just in there, like a little washer in there, a little aluminium spacer, just like you would get on your arms there at the top there. And I haven't got any of those, none come in the kit. But if you tighten them up full tight, they bind on the axle or on the bearing and stop the bearing from enabling it to spin. So you actually need those. Probably, I would say it's a 2mm top and bottom. So I am going to have to find something to go in there now, which is a little disappointing. I know it's obviously the cheapest of kits, but you'd think if you need that stuff, they should supply that stuff. Okay, so continuing to faff about with this, I have spaced the bottom one a little bit more. I changed both ball studs for a longer ball stud to fit on the washers I needed. I'll measure them up and check them and put it in the description, but essentially you can see now that these arms are parallel, because when I started to assemble it, you started to realise that when they're not parallel, you can see that these two aren't parallel over here. What happens is the wheel crunches up. So as you have some compression at the front there, you're actually getting a change in camber. So you watch that, look, that's camber is about -6 on that at the moment. And can you see it's nearly square under compression? So you're going to get camber changes as the arms move. So I'm guessing that's a bad thing. Like, why would you want different camber under different compression to make the wheel handle differently? I guess control of that is good, but I don't like the idea of that. So I've got rid of that and I'm changing them to parallel. So I'm just going to change this bottom ball stud, and then I've got nice full parallel movement of those two arms. I'm not going to bother putting them back together, but essentially, if you make a comparison of the two, what they are here is very close to the standard one now. So distance wise, these were parallel when they're moving up and down, so you've got no change in camber. So when you're building a set of these wrap up next knuckles, you do need these spacers top and bottom, otherwise you're going to have a horrendous change in camber. Wouldn't it be nice if they supplied that stuff in the kit? Hey ho. But yeah, I am getting there. So just to wrap this up, bad pun, but essentially these are the things that I needed to make my wrap up next. Knuckles fit the YD2, so I needed a new ball stud here because the ball stud I had a larger end on it from the YD2 kit, and it hit this top part here. So I had a smaller, slightly angled ball stud, seemed to work a bit better. So I needed that, and I had that from spares from the YD2 kit. So potentially that's because the previous owner of this YD2 didn't fit the same one. Then I needed longer ball studs, top and bottom here. They were, all three of those ball studs are 6mm ball studs, which I had spares, but you would need those. The spacer, top and bottom, to keep the wrap up next knuckle in the right position and keep the arms parallel, is a 3mm spacer at the top and a 3mm spacer at the bottom. And once all of that was done, they fit real nice, they feel real snug. Because of the new ball studs and stuff, there's no play in them. And now they're kind of in the position to get set up. One of the things I did have on the standard YD2 is that you can see on the arm, I put a little stud in here, so it had like a lockout, so it couldn't oversteer Well, clearly that's going to miss that now. So I need to probably readjust that, or just make sure they don't oversteer. But we'll see where we get with that. So that concludes this kind of how to fit them. It has been a bit of a pain. I did need a whole host of each of bits and bobs and spares from my kit. Hopefully you've got those too to enable you to fit them. If you can't fit them, then that's the kind of thing I'd be looking for. Some little 2mm washer spacers, sorry, 3mm washer spacers top and bottom, and 6mm ball studs, 3 off per side. And then the 850 bearings are the bearings that you need. I got my wrap-up next knuckles from RC Pace in the UK. They didn't sell the bearings, but the bearings were dead easy to get hold of from eBay. So that's put that all together. All I need to do now is pop the wheels back on, get it under its normal weight, and set up my toe. And there we go, all fit up. A couple of things I've noticed straight away is on my standard settings, the wheel is coming so much further around now, it's nearly hitting this shock, so I've had to move the shock back in. I suppose the other option there is to widen the front slightly, just come out a notch here. But I tended to find I understeered more if I did that, so I need to mess around with my settings before I start messing around with that. So I've moved my shock in a notch, and it clears it. But actually, these are the Racing bottom arms. Again, I'm trying to sort of not choose the sort of obvious Racing stuff with this car. All my other D5 is Racing. And I don't mind the stuff. It's fairly decent sort of standard quality. But I heard someone comment about it not being a mod or not being an improvement. And I have to say, I don't know whether it is an improvement of a standard. I'm not sure. So I quite like to try some different stuff on this YD2 rather than going Racing like the D5. But this has adjustable shock, obviously position right out here. But the wheel is actually starting to hit that. Now these aren't pretty girthy wheels. They're an ET of 6, but it's on an 8mm spacer already. On the inside on the hex. So I think what I might do is whip these off and just grind away the corner there, because I'm probably not going to use that shock position all the way out there anyway. Because if you see when the wheel comes right round, it's just catching on that inside edge there. There you go, look, it just wants a little bit less lock. But actually, if you have a look, this is just guessing the settings. The Ackerman's pretty good, look. As it turns around, they're pretty parallel. A little bit out in the kind of their position. Could be the angle of the camera. You can see that. That looks pretty darn good. This is leaning over a little bit. Obviously, the caster's pulling that over. I could pull that little back a little bit maybe. Have a play around with it. But that's basically very similar to what it was before. So I've got kind of a good starting point, hopefully, in a car that drove pretty well anyway, just with a little bit of understeer to mess around with to get rid of. When I made my carbon shock tower, incidentally, I made it bigger and I made myself loads of options here, thinking I could have my suspension all over the place. Clearly, spacing-wise, I really can't. But hey-ho, you live, you learn when you build these things. So there you go, my wrap-up next is on. I'm kind of happy with the settings-ish. I just need to maybe sort out that little bit of clearance problem there, grind that away a little bit on that corner, or set my spacing up to stop it. That bolt can now go because it's got no chance of doing anything on these spaces. They completely clear it. Look, it's doing zip. So that's going to go. And then I need to get it now trackside and have a play with it. But there you go, some wrap-up knuckles on a YD2, and with a whole load of faff, they do fit quite nicely and seem like quite a nice little bit of kit. But don't forget you need those extra parts. Right.